Hello everyone and welcome. Today we're going to take a look at another Emory Tate versus Nakamura game. We've already taken a look at two, but I believe this is the third and final game in the trilogy. This was played in the World Open, again in 1999, but this was known as a side event, so this was probably either a rapid play or a blitz tournament or something. So not a serious game, but honour is on the line here, and if you're Emory Tate, I'm guessing you don't want to lose to an 11-year-old kid once again. In this game, Nakamura was playing with the white pieces and Tate was playing with black. So in all three games, Nakamura has had white, to be fair. So the game kicked off with another Sicilian. Hikaru played e4, Tate played c5, Nakamura now played knight to c3, black played g6, and again Hikaru played f4, a very aggressive line, with black playing bishop to g7, and white developing their knight to f3. And here black played a very unusual move, knight to h6. They always say knights on the rim are dim, and this is for a reason. The knight's a bit offside, to be fair, but the idea for black is to make an early push with f5, as we'll see. So Hikaru plays bishop c4, a6 is played, preparing the move b5. We need to watch out for this as white, so we're forced to play a4 to stop this. And then black played f5, so the f-pawn supported by the knight on h6, and the computer actually suggests here that you should push the pawn to e5, but however I think that black may actually want this, because then you can play moves like e6, play knight to f7, and if it's a blitz game it's going to be very hard to break down this position. So I think Hikaru played the correct move in this sort of position. He played d3, keeping the tension in the centre and in this structure here, and black played e6 to support his f5 pawn, and now he can castle if he wishes to. So both sides do actually castle, and white played queen to e1. Queen to e1 is quite a typical move in these sort of positions. Usually you want to try and get your queen to an h4 square and try to be hyper aggressive and support your e pawn as well. Tate played knight to c6, developing a piece. Hikaru played king to h1. Getting the king away from a diagonal like queen to b6, if black plays this, it's kind of tricky. Also, I imagine white wants to play h3 and g4 now that he's got his queen to e1. Tate went in with knight to d4 though, disrupting the centre. White takes on d4, the pawn recaptured, the knight went to e2, and black played d5. And this is sort of like fairly standard positions in sort of Grand Prix attack positions. White takes on d5, black recaptured, and the bishop went back to d3. So this sort of structure is fairly even at the moment. However, black does have two very weak pawns. So the d5 pawn and the d4 pawn will become targets soon enough. And it's going to be actually very tricky to defend both of them. But Tate actually does well in this game, you'll see. He played rook to e8 first. Queen to f2 from Hikaru, so attacking this pawn twice. Knight g4 attacks the queen though. The queen is forced to move to f3, but white again counterattacks. And they're attacking this d5 pawn twice, forcing black to defend. He doesn't mind defending this though, because it develops his bishop. But you'll note this bishop looks terrible, mainly because all of black's pawns are on white squares. This bishop is really going to be ineffective. Could become effective in the endgame, but at the moment it's pretty useless. It's basically a pawn. h3 from Hikaru hits the knight, forcing it to jump backwards. It goes back to h6. Queen f2 from Hikaru attacks the pawn on d4 twice, forcing black to defend with queen to b6. And again, this is basically an attacking game. One side attacks and the other side counter-attacks. So now a5 from Hikaru hits the queen on b6. It forces it to another square. Queen c5 still protects the pawn on d4. Hikaru now just developed with bishop to d2, supporting his pawn on a5. And there's nothing wrong with this move at all. It controls also the b4 square, which could be key as well. And it really limits black's opportunities. It's actually really hard now for black to come up with a decent move. So Tate just developed rook a c8, seems logical. Get your rook onto an open file. And I really liked Hikaru's next move. He played rook to a4. 3 pieces now attacking d4. It's very unusual to put your rook here, but it's really nice. Bishop d7 though from black attacks the rook. That's always tricky, putting your rook on the 4th rank, because it can be quickly attacked. But Hikaru's not scared. He played rook to b4, going in for the complications. And the complications here are queen takes a5. Now, this looks like a really bad move at first sight. I thought maybe you could play rook takes b7 here, but queen takes d2, rook takes d7 doesn't actually work due to this queen takes e2, because the rook's attacking it along with the queen. So you actually lose material if you do this as white. Instead, after queen takes a5, Hikaru just won a pawn back as himself and played knight takes d4. If bishop takes the knight, then the queen will just recapture, and it's probably decent for white, to be honest. So queen c5 instead attacks the knight twice, and forces white to defend it with pawn to c3, and also protect his rook at the same time. This rook is still attacking b7, by the way, so for this reason Tate played bishop to c6 to protect. And Hikaru decided to go in for knight takes c6. So he took off his really good knight for this very weak bishop. So why did he do this? Well, after queen takes c6, he gets quite a dominant position with this rook. This rook is an absolute monster. It plays rook to b6, attacks the queen. Also still attacking b7, so forces black to go backwards to defend the pawn. And now queen to f3. All of a sudden, this d5 pawn is become very weak. 2 pieces now attack it. And white's pieces are just encroaching on the position, and black's pieces are in the game, but you'll notice there's one piece that isn't, this knight on h6, so maybe this wasn't such a great opening from black. So rook e to d8 defends the pawn along with the queen, and but bishop to e1 from Hikaru. He's preparing moves like bishop to h4, where he'll hit the rook on d8. Bishop to f8 though, a very sneaky move, because if you now play bishop to h4, there's a very nice tactic with just bishop to c5, and if you continue with bishop takes d8, black won't take the rook on b6, they'll play rook takes bishop, and you'll see that this rook is actually trapped. If it goes to f6, then king g7, so it's forced to b4, and then black will just pick it up with bishop takes b4, pawn takes, and king to g7. White is still technically ahead from the computer's perspective, but it's very equal, and black would have probably favoured this position. So bishop f8 was a very good move, but Hikaru just locks everything down, just plays d4, stops black from playing bishop to c5, renews the threat of bishop to h4 now, because black can no longer play bishop to c5. Instead, black defends with bishop to e7, covers the h4 square, and Hikaru just plays bishop to f2, making way for his rook to come to e1. The king comes to f7, the rook comes to e1, and black played bishop to f6. Now there was actually a very good tactic after bishop to f6. White could have played an exchange sacrifice with rook takes f6. It would have been temporary, obviously, because after king takes f6, bishop h4 check, king f7, bishop takes rook, rook takes bishop, and now the killer move, rook to e5. We'll pick up the pawn on d5, and this would have been like a killer blow for black's chances. Maybe Hikaru saw this, but instead he opted to play c4, smashing open the centre of the position. This bishop does eye up the rook on f7, so I can see why he played it. If black takes on c4, then rook takes b7 is really good. Obviously you can play rook to c7, but now comes a nice move, bishop c4 check. The rook can't move, because then obviously the rook on b7 will take the queen on d7, and black will be forced to hide, and white will have a supreme position, with moves like bishop to e6 coming in next. After c4 then, in the game, Tate played king to g7 to get off the bishop diagonal, and I really liked Hikaru's next move. The computer obviously suggests going into loads of complications here, but he keeps it really simple with just c5. Blocks up the position. This bishop now becomes a bit useless. The renewed threat on d5 occurs with the 2 pieces attacking it, And this c-pawn is so far up the board it defends the rook on b6. I feel like black's in a lot of trouble now. So finally Tate gets his knight into the game with knight to f7, but it could be too little too late. Hikaru crashes in with his other rook to e6, threatening to take on f6. Tate plays rook to c6, trying to trade a pair of rooks off, which happens. Rook takes c6 is played. Pawn takes c6. And Hikaru played bishop to a4, so attacking the c6 pawn twice. Also, this rook is attacking a6, and we'll take this at a later date. Rook c8 was played to defend c6, and Hikaru picks up a free pawn. Thank you very much. So white's now a pawn up in a late middle game, soon to be endgame most likely. Tate played bishop to d8, queen to a3 from Hikaru, g5 from Tate. So I feel like black knows they've lost this position so far, so he's opening up the position to get some complications. g5 actually isn't that good a move because white could have taken it if they wished. Pawn takes g5, knight takes g5, and bishop g3. This bishop just becomes an absolute monster with these squares opening up for it. Obviously the knight can jump back to f7, but then white can just get their other bishop into the game. Attacking f5 and bringing the queen to f3 would be very good. Also, rook a7 ideas are on the card as well. So after g5, Hikaru just played bishop to c2 instead, rerouting his bishop. The queen went to e6, and Hikaru now offered a trade of queens. The trade would really favour white, so black avoids it with queen to h6. And actually now white just wins another pawn with bishop takes f5. So black's really struggling. G takes f4 wins the pawn back, but now comes a monster of a move. Queen to e8 renews the threat against a rook, and the queen's attacking the bishop as well. So if the knight or the rook ever move away, this bishop is coming under fire, and it's also pinned. Black played rook to b8, and Hikaru just goes in for the kill now. Rook to a7, a double attack against the knight on f7, forces black to defend with the queen. And now do you see this tactic that Hikaru spotted? I'll give you a moment to think about this, so please pause the video if you want to take some time to look at what Hikaru tried to play here and what the winning move is. But he played rook takes f7 with check. The point is now queen takes f7, there's queen e5 check, and we'll pick up the rook and move after. But also the bishops will also be taken, as you'll see. So after queen f6 to block the check, there's queen takes rook. Black picks up the bishop on f5, but now white finally picks up another piece. Queen takes d8, and all of a sudden they're a whole bishop up in the position. Tate goes for his last opportunity at f3, hoping white will take on f3 to give some sort of perpetual check. But Hikaru, even at age 11, is too good for this. Plays queen c7 with check. The king went to g8. Queen to g3, king to h8, and yes, white could take on f3 if they wished, but he even goes for a more simple approach, just plays queen e5 check, forces the trade of queens, and black takes on g2, king takes g2. But in this final position, after a few more moves, eventually white goes king to f4, there's h5, bishop to e3, and black resigned the game from here, because it's such an easy win. With an extra piece, white will just hoover up the pawns and get another queen with relative ease and absolutely no problem. So even at age 11, Hikaru wins a third game against Emory Tate. I'll have to uncover if there's any more games between these two. I'm not actually sure if there is, but if there are, I'm sure I can find them. But it's good to see even at this early age, Hikaru was an incredibly strong player. And he made this game look relatively easy against such an experienced opponent. Anyway, hope you enjoyed my analysis of this game. If you did, please do drop a like, comment and subscribe for more chess content and to help you with your chess in the future.